Chapter 9. Intermission Gelet. OSHT, you've really done it now. This is why you can't afford to be lazy. Gelet was having a really bad day. First, Baldora's disappearance had thrown a lot of his plans off, enough for him to make a drastic move and push forward the creation of an orc disaster. Everything went smoothly from then on. The orcs would advance with their overwhelming numbers and consume both the ogres and the lizardmen. And if that wasn't enough to create a demon lord, there were plenty of goblins and monsters in the forest to feed on. He was so confident in his plans that he had just sent the orcs on their way to the ogres, and once the time came, he would meet with them and enjoy the show. He wandered around the forest until he found a miserable lizardman. And since he was having such a good day, with everything now going according to plan, he decided to give it a name. Once he arrived near the destination of the ogre village, he had a bad feeling in his gut. Everything was silent. A bit too silent. He sped up towards the village until he found it. An abandoned village. With its buildings abandoned and without a trace of a struggle. He quickly took out his recording orb and tried to contact the orcs he had sent towards the village. Perhaps their stupid brains got turned around and went in the wrong direction. However, he wasn't able to connect with them. And due to his directions of not activating the recording orbs, unless something important was about to happen, as they required a constant supply of magicules on both ends in order to record, he was left with nothing. Gelet was really worried. Clayman was not a forgiving man, and he had just made a huge mistake. Even though he had no clue what had happened after flying around the nearby vicinity of the ogre village and not finding a trace of a battle, he would get the blame as this was his responsibility. It doesn't matter, he said with a cold sweat on his back. I bet they're so stupid they just ate themselves on the way here, right? At least I still have a large majority on my side. This is just a mild problem. Solving this is going to be super easy, barely an inconvenience. I guess I just have to take better care of the rest of the orcs. But wait, that doesn't explain what happened to the ogre village. Taking out his communication orb, he tried to contact the orc generals. He released a breath he didn't know he was holding after they had answered. How much time do you think you have before arriving at the lizardman territory? The slightly glazed eyes of the orc general gained enough clarity for a few moments to be able to answer. 13 days left. Damn it, I don't have enough time to play hide and seek with the ogres. I guess they will have to wait until after I create the demon lord. With that, he flew off, heading towards the orcs' location. Chapter 10. Meeting the Dryad. I had left the cave and noticed the stares from the people around me. They were filled with even greater respect than usual. It was as if they were looking at a mighty king. I guess the effect of Commander's aura and charm together creates this sort of effect. In the distance, I could see the ogres arriving at the village. A similar situation to what happened with the goblins occurred. Except for this time, a few of them were looking at me with stars in their eyes. I guess they must have heard about the fight with orcs. The village chief approached me, and once he was just a few feet away, he kneeled on one knee. And a second later, the rest of the ogres followed suit. I have talked with the members of my village on the trip here. And we have decided to accept the offer to join your village. I hope we will be of service. In that case, let us begin with the naming. Thanks to the fight with the orcs, I can now name 10 ogres per day. Let us start with you, village chief. Your name shall be Mamameru, Benimeru, Shion, Shuna, Sally, Hikuro, Kurb, Murik, Barut, Gutmid. After giving names to the ogres, I called upon Benimeru, Hikuro, and Mamameru to follow me for a meeting with Rigard. Shuna had also followed as she offered to serve tea and some snacks she had packed, and you know we never say no to snacks. We had to discuss our plans for how to deal with the orc lord. And, minutes after we had entered the room in which we would talk, Shion knocked on the door to inform me of a special guest who wanted to talk with us. After I agreed to the meeting, I walked onto my chair, and the moment I sat down, a gust of wind appeared in the middle of the room, and a dryad appeared. My greetings to you, leader of the monsters. I am Trainee the Dryad. It is nice to meet you. My name is Rimuru Tempest. Feel free to call me Rimuru. May I know the reason for this visit? Sir Rimuru, I have come here to discuss some events you may be aware of, and I come to ask for your assistance. As you may already know, an orc lord has appeared. And if he keeps following the path he is taking, we dryads won't have enough strength to stop him once he reaches the Trine community. So as a representative, I please ask you to help us stop this threat. One of my sisters saw your fight with a small army of orcs, and it shows that you are more than qualified for this job. In addition, we have confirmed that a high-level magician is assisting the orc lord in the background. This could imply the involvement of a demon lord. If you assist us, we will be eternally grateful. And we will do anything within our powers to pay back this favor. I agree to help fight this orc lord. However, I think we should keep the casualties from the orcs to a minimum. If I am not wrong, they are currently under the effect of a spell that makes them lose their minds and turns them into a fearless army, right? That is correct, it is the spell that orc lords gain called starving. In that case, the majority of the orcs are not in their right minds. And I don't want to take the lives of those who are doing what they are doing because they are under the effect of a skill. During the battle against the Orc Lord, I would like for us to try to stop the orcs in place or neutralize them in a way that doesn't involve killing. I will deal with the Orc Lord. Trainee gave me a surprised look, followed by a warm smile. Sir Rimuru, if you are capable of defeating the Orc Lord, I am sure the effect of the skill will stop on the rest of the orcs. Even if we stop the Orc Lord, that doesn't change the fact that the orcs will not have enough food for all of them, said Takuro. You are right, as we stand now, we don't have enough resources to feed an army of 190,000 orcs. Trainee, is there any way the Dryads can assist with food provisions? Trainee thought for a few seconds and exclaimed, the trees produce fruits that can fill one's stomach for days. We have enough of them at the moment that we could probably feed them for a week or two. Can Dryads make food grow faster and in a higher quantity? By this point, Trainee was getting the idea of the plans I had in mind. The conversation carried on for a few hours, and by the end of it, we had a plan of action. The next morning, Cavel's party decided to return to report to their guildmaster. They seemed to have enjoyed the hospitality of the village. They mentioned how they wanted to return for a longer stay on a happier occasion before they left. And I sent them off with 2 goblin riders to help keep them safer while they traveled through the more dangerous part of the forest. We didn't have much time before leaving for Lizardman territory, but there were still a few things I had to prepare. There was one thing I wanted to try specifically. Takuro, would you mind having a small meeting with me? It would be my honor, Sir Rimuru. How can I be of assistance? Well, you see, I am not someone who is well versed in sword fighting. And I am well aware that my magic won't always work on my enemies. And though I would like to learn this in a proper way, I have a way to speed up my learning. With the skills shared, I could learn your sword style and some of the knowledge you have gained throughout your time as a swordsman. Would you allow me to use this skill? That, Sir Rimuru. Takuro was hesitating. It was quite a big request to let someone enter your mind and learn from it. If I had unlimited time, I would not mind learning it the traditional way, but alas, that was not the case. I could see the gears turning in his head until a determined expression appeared on his face. Sir Rimuru, though I would have liked to teach you personally, I understand your position. As the leader of our village, you must be prepared to protect it from any threat. You may use your skill. Thank you. Understood. Activating skill shared mind on the target. No resistance was found. Scanning the target for requested memories. Copying selected memories. Mission successful. Takuro's sword arts have been successfully learned. And just like that, I knew how to wield a sword. Quite handy, if I do say so myself. The next few hours were spent naming ogres and selecting the people who would go with me to the Lizardman territory. By the next day, we were ready to depart. Following me were 15 kitchen, 50 ogres, and 30 of the 50 goblin riders we currently had available. It's a bit of an overkill considering the plan we had made, and the fact that I was planning to head straight toward the Orc Lord during the fight, but it is always better to be over-prepared than under-prepared. 5 of the newly named kitchen had stayed behind to guard the village, in case anything happened to it while I was away. With everything prepared, we headed off to where the Orc Lord was located. Chapter 11. The Orc Disaster. Gelet was a bit tired. He had taken a hands-on approach to the creation of the Orc Disaster. And he had to admit that dealing with those under the influence of starvation was the most frustrating thing he had ever done. He had met zombies easier to deal with than them. It had gotten to the point where he would go out of his way to defeat strong monsters to feed the Orc Lord in hopes of triggering his evolution. They were getting closer to the Lizardman tribe, and he was hoping that they would be enough. He flew near the Orc Lord and asked him, "How are you doing, you big starving piece of shit? Feel any different yet? More hungry? Maybe I should lock you up in a cell, and see if starving more than you are right now will help you evolve. What do you think about that?" No response. The Orc Lord's mind was clouded. All he could think of was feeding his people. He was somewhere deep in his mind, but the hunger had made him lose all reason. At this point, he was moving on instinct to wherever he could find food. He could hear Gelet, the magic-born who had named him, talking to him. However, he couldn't understand him. It was as if anything that wasn't food was clouded. It didn't feel great, but it was the only way to keep the orcs alive. Ironically enough, the only thing that kept the orcs from dying of starvation was starvation itself. However, he could begin to feel the changes inside of him. Deep down, he knew that once the change fully took place, he would be in a better position to help his fellow orcs. He could feel the change getting closer and closer. He could feel the clarity returning. They were heading directly in the direction that Trainee had given them. Due to the fact that they were a week ahead of schedule, the Orc Lord was quite a bit away from the Lizardman territory. So he had sent Saoi and 2 other Kijins toward the Lizardman territory as diplomats, while the rest of my group made a line to the Orc Lord. Since we are both heading in similar directions, we should be arriving at their location in 2 days. Once we were a mile from the direction of the orcs, we stopped. We were preparing for a sneak attack. While we could go in guns blazing, it would cause too many unnecessary casualties on the orc side. And even if I were not to care for their deaths, though I was stronger at the moment than my original counterpart, it didn't mean I should just jump right into the middle of 190,000 hungry orcs. We had set up the ambush at our location close enough that if we were to be detected while infiltrating them, the ones staying behind would reach the battle quickly. I and a few of the now 23 Kijin in our group who had the shadow motion skill would go and hide in the shadows of the Orc Lord and his generals. Sneaking in was fairly easy. Though I could not say I was prepared for what I was about to see. Gelet is flying in the direction of the Orc Lord, carrying some huge corpses. "Here you go, you useless piece of bacon," Gelet said as he dropped off the corpse. "They can't even hunt for themselves without disappearing into nothingness. I swear, I am going to enjoy bossing you around once your brain can process any orders other than eat your piece of." Gelet kept on throwing his temper tantrum at the Orc Lord. I could see the location of the ambush getting closer. But then I got launched into damage control mode. The Orc Lord's eyes appeared to gain clarity as he ate the snake. He gave one look at Gelet, and the next thing I knew, he had picked him up and eaten him. Shit, this wasn't how it was supposed to go. "Attack now," I screamed through my mental link. We all jumped into action at that moment. The Kijin hiding in the shadows jumped out and grabbed a hold of the Orc generals through various means, whether by using threats or by using different types of spells to freeze, shock, or trap them in the dirt. The ones who stayed behind jumped out and created barriers using a similar method as the ones hiding in the shadows. By doing this, we effectively reduced their army of 190,000 to less than 50 inside the barrier. The few that made it through were stopped by the Goblin Riders and pushed back. This left the Orc Lord, or, should I say, the evolving Orc Lord, for me. The plan was to use Dark Thunder to shock him long enough for me to use a Predator on him. Unfortunately, this did not work. The Dark Thunder struck him, but he was more shocked by the surprise attack coming out of nowhere than by the actual thunder. "Chaos Eater," he yelled. Snake-like tendrils of energy shot out from his back, heading in my direction. I quickly fell back down through his shadows so that they would hit the ground. Shadow magic. Shadow expansion, I thought. The shadow of the newly awakened orc disaster expanded all around him. Shadow magic. Dark tendrils. Surrounded by his own shadow, the orc disaster saw tendrils grow from underneath him and wrap his whole body, rendering him immobile. "You think this is enough to stop me? I am Gelet, the orc disaster. I shall feed you all to my ire." He had just gotten hit by a debilitate spell. Let this be a lesson to you kids. Don't make speeches in the middle of a fight. Dumping out of his shadow, I saw him using his Chaos Eater to try to eat the shadow tendrils. And, while it was working, it would take too long for him to be freed from them. "How the hell are you eating literal shadows?" "Well, I guess I am using shadows as some sort of rope, so I am not one to talk." I jumped towards him and used the Predator. The actual process of eating him was far easier than expected, due to the circumstances he now finds himself in. "Don't worry, big guy, I promise I'll help the orcs find food. You know that this isn't the right way to do it. They are not themselves anymore. I made a deal with the Dryads, and they are going to help me feed them. So please, do not resist." By the time I had finished using thought communication to send my message, I was 90% of the way through covering him to eat him. I saw his eyes look at me with panic, frustration, anger, and then acceptance. If it was because he heard my message or because he realized that the fight was lost, he stopped resisting. He took one last look at the battlefield, and saw that not one of his orcs had died during this fight. The last emotion that appeared in his eyes was relief. And so the short life of the orc disaster ended. Chapter 12. Jur Tempest Federation. Clayman was relaxing in his chair. He was looking through his window. Recently, one of his servants, Gelet, had somehow lost not only 10,000 orcs, but also the entire ogre tribe. Even worse, he had nothing to show for it. So he had commanded him to give a recording orb to the orcs that would always be active. And instead of trusting him to manage the recording and save what was important, he had some of his subordinates do it. He was getting regular reports on the progress of the Orc Lord, and knew that the arrival of his puppet Demon Lord was close. If everything went according to his plan, he would become the strongest member of the Demon Lords. Soon enough, with the help of the moderate jesters, he would bring his creator back to life. And, with him by his side, he would be unstoppable. He would finally take revenge on Leon for killing his master. Knock knock. "Come in. Lord Clayman, we have an urgent report about the Orc Lord." Appearing in front of the lizardman, Chieftain Sally and his two assistants, Kotaro and Hanzo, were quickly surrounded by the nearby lizardmen. But before the lizardmen could get too close, they were stopped by the chieftain. "Halt. To what do I owe your visit, ogres? We have come as envoys of our lord to deliver his invitation. My great lord Rimuru has graciously passed on an invitation for the lizardman tribe to become his subordinates. He promises to defeat the orc lord that is approaching your village as a show of his power. But don't think that you will gain anything from becoming his subordinate. To you, he promises what he has promised us, ogres. He promises to name all the members of your tribe. He promises his defense in case of danger. And he promises a free pass to join his growing village, a place that will become the mightiest kingdom in due time. All he requires is your loyalty and servitude. However, there's one thing you have wrong. I am no longer an ogre. Thanks to my lord, I have evolved into a Kijin. And soon enough, all of my village will be too. The chieftain was shocked. He had expected the mention of the orc lord. After all, he was not only a threat to his village, but to the rest of the Jura forest. What he did not expect was an invitation to join someone's village as a subordinate. Not only that, but he had been offered to have all of his people named. However, he couldn't take all that he said at face value. Before he could ask his next question, one of his guards acted before him. Chief, you don't have to listen to them. I have never heard of a Rimuru in this forest. They must be trying to trick you. The guard attempted to approach the Kijins, but the moment he took a step forward he found that he couldn't move. You're lucky that my lord has asked you to accept this invitation peacefully. Otherwise, you would have lost your head at that very moment, Hanzo said. I thank you for your patience, Kijins. And, though I know our tribe does not stand a chance against a fight with you three, how am I to trust that your lord Rimuru can provide what he says? At that moment a gust of wind flew in the middle of the room, and a beautiful green-haired woman appeared. You may trust the words of the Kijin, chieftain. I have personally witnessed Sir Rimuru in action. Both in battle and in the naming of the ogres, he has shown that he keeps his promise. I, as a dryad, protector of this forest, can guarantee his word. Trya, Trainee's sister, had appeared to assist in the negotiations. You have obtained the unique skill Starved. Combining Starved with Predator. Unique skill Gluttony has been acquired. The skill Gluttony contains all the abilities of the skill Predator, in addition to the skills of the Starved, which are Corrosion, the ability to decompose the target in conjunction with predation. Also, the ability to add the abnormal condition of decomposition. There is a chance of acquiring an ability after consuming only a part of a target's body. However, the chance of that happening is less than that of consuming the whole body. Passive. It is possible to acquire skills from one's subordinates. However, one must raise proficiency on one's own. Magic and knowledge also cannot be transferred. Supply. Whether subordinate or not, the user can grant an ability to a monster with whom he has a relationship, limited by the target's inherent magical energy. Now that the orc disaster has been defeated, the rest of the orcs have lost their will to fight. Recalling all that they had done while starving was not a pleasant experience. They had even eaten their own comrades, and now they were sure to all die at the hands of the mysterious elf. Seeing the defeated faces of the orcs, I decided to speak up. Listen up, everyone. I have no intention of killing any of you. You were all under the effect of a skill, so in my eyes, you are innocent. The orc disaster, though with good intentions, was the one who had commanded you to starve, so he is the one guilty of your crimes. And don't worry about what you will have to eat. The dryads and I will help you acquire a stable source of food. For now, choose a representative to join me and the lizardman for a meeting where we shall discuss the details. Once the representative was chosen, we led the way towards the lizardman territory, the location for the meeting. Things went smoothly with the lizardman, the dryads, and the orcs agreeing to join me. I gave the lizardman and the orc representative names on the spot. Abil and Geld. Just like that, the Jura Tempest Federation had been created. We let the orcs and lizardmen who would stay at Tempest back. The near future appeared to be filled with naming and building. After eating the orc disaster, my magic increased, which meant I could name more people per day. Many things have happened these past 2 months. The construction of the city had increased tremendously. With the help of the newly named orcs, we had started to develop the infrastructure needed for a good part of the city, with some buildings already in progress. With the help of the dwarves and the best architect and inventor I could think of, Great Sage, we had planned out plumbing and many other necessities. While I hadn't finished naming all of the monsters in my village, I had made good progress. But not only was I way behind on naming, but I was also adding new monsters by the day. Zijin, a large beetle, and a pedo, who looked like a large bee. And during these past few months, other villages of monsters who lived in the forest approached with wishes to join. Thanks to the skills the ogres brought, we had access to better clothes and fabrics, blacksmithing, cooking, and magic techniques. At this moment, the citizens of Tempest had actual proper clothing and great tools to help with the manual labor. I had helped a lot in any way I could with the use of my clones, with Sage helping me manage them. The personal strength of the citizens had also grown. While not every single citizen was required to join in on the battle and fighting class, Takuro taught a good chunk of them to do so, just to grow strong enough to protect themselves, and help defend the city should they ever need to. The only thing required of the citizens was to study one of the following skills. Blacksmithing, taught by Kurub and his assistant Kakuro. Farming is taught by the Dryads. Construction, taught by Murd. Weaving, taught by Shuna and her assistant Yua, who was also a Kijin. And a few other jobs. Benimaru had become the general of the current Tempest army. I had expected his father, Mamameru, to take on the role, but then I was reminded that monsters lose strength when they become parents. And so, Benimaru was actually quite a bit stronger than his father. Saoi had started his own intelligence gathering organization with many of his previous Kijin friends who had a similar skill set. A few of the lizardmen who had now evolved into dragonites had joined too. And some of the hobgoblins who had learned Shadow Step decided to join too. During this time, I had gotten close to a few girls. Xian and Shuna had done their best to be the first to get close to me. It was fun to be around these two kitchen. Shuna was very sweet and kind, and she would always bring snacks she had made. Something I found out about her was how good she was at giving massages. While I technically may not have muscles, I could still feel the relaxation that came with massages. Xian was determined to become my secretary. And not just any secretary, but the #1 in the whole world. She did try her hand at cooking me meals like Shuna, but you know how they ended up. It was quite endearing to see her work so hard as my secretary, even if sometimes she woke up and chose violence. I taught her that just because a problem could be solved with violence, it didn't mean that it should. Trya had started hanging out with me every time she wasn't busy helping out on the farms. Apparently, she had been the one to witness my fight against the 10,000 orcs, and she thought I was really cool. She kept talking about how she was frustrated that she had been sent to the lizardmen by Trainin, instead of being able to see the fight against the orc disaster. Saka was someone I hadn't expected to become my fan. I guess in the end, this time she hadn't been rescued by Sae from the jail, since we had taken care of the orc lord, while Gabble was still out trying to get goblins to join him. When I went to help Sae with his class to explain the usage of shadow magic, I went a bit overboard and ended up catching her attention. Talking about Gabble, he had tried to pull the coup stunt, but ended up getting his ass kicked and getting grounded and sent to Tempest to work by the Evolved Abyll. Now there were only a few preparations left to do before the arrival of Gazel and Milim. Chapter 13. Doing the Devil's Tango, Part 1. Lina. A lot had happened since she moved to this new city called Tempest. She had decided to follow the man she had fallen for. When she arrived at what was only a small town, she was a little worried. After all, it was mostly barren and filled with hobgoblins, with only a few small huts and falling apart tents. As she was being honest, she was wondering what she had gotten herself into, and if following her heart was really worth it. Not only had she arrived here, but she had been followed by her best friend, Aaron. Thankfully, with the help of the dwarves, it started to look like an actual place you could live in extremely quickly. The hobgoblins she had been worried about were surprisingly friendly to her. A sense of familial affection could be felt from the way every one of them acted with each other. She quickly developed some friendships and started helping out in the village in any way she could. She had gotten to spend a lot of time with Rimuru in the 10 days he stayed in the village before he had to leave. Being near him brought her a sense of warmth and comfort. She had been there when they saw his faded person and knew that it wasn't her. So she had to deal with the feelings that she probably would have to share with him. When he came back, walking with the one I had seen in his vision, I got a bit scared and hid. I wasn't sure how to approach the conversation with her. I spent the whole night thinking about what to say to both Rimuru and the masked girl, but the very next day I found out that she had died, willingly giving her life away to stop the fire spirit inside her from escaping. I hadn't slept the whole night thinking about what to say, only to be told that news. A few hours later, 300 ogres arrived at the village. Rimuru arrived to greet them and... Did he get more handsome? What in the spirit's names was going on here? When he named the ogres, I saw the two girls he had named giving him the look. The purple-haired one had stars in her eyes, and the pink-haired one was looking at him with the same eyes she did. More competition had arrived. Taking a quick look at him, I saw with how much seriousness he was talking with a few of the newly named ogres, and I saw them walk away. Understanding how important it was just by looking at him, I decided to wait until tomorrow to talk to him. The next day, we were able to talk. He told me about what he had done during his trip, and about his plans for fighting against the threat to the forest. He told me that pretty soon, the population of the village would grow. Once this problem had been dealt with, he would get some free time, and we could finally finish what we started. I got a bit excited hearing that, but soon the two faces of the new Kijin girls popped into my mind. Rimuru, am I going to be the only girl you pursue? Looking at me, he said the exact words I didn't want to hear. No, I don't think so. I want to tell you the truth, and the truth is there will be more. Now, I had spent all of last night getting myself ready for this possibility with the masked girl, but now I was dealing with more than just the masked girl. I need some time to think about this. I gave him a quick peck on the lips and stood up. You better stay safe out there. If I find out you got hurt, I'll be angry, and you don't want to see an angry elf. Lena was standing outside the door to his room. Some time had passed since the conversation she had with Rimuru that day. And even though they still spent a lot of time together since then, she had told him to wait for her to be ready. They had even had a few talks about this topic. And now she had made up her mind. Now she was ready to finish what they started. Once she entered the room, she looked him in the eyes. I have made up my mind. If I can't have you for myself, then I'll have you first. With those words, she closed the door behind her and locked it. The next moment, she dropped her robe, revealing her naked body. Rimuru was a bit shocked. He was in the middle of organizing plans for the building of the city, so he was caught off guard. However, he reacted immediately. He stood up and walked towards her. He grabbed her chin and looked deep into her eyes. Then let's do it. I love you. I love you too. Those words pushed her over the edge once again. The best one she had ever had a few moments ago was quickly replaced by this one. The words that came from Rimuru's mouth and the warm feeling that followed only helped to intensify and prolong her. To Rimuru, this was also the best feeling he had ever had. The best part was that he did not have to worry about her getting pregnant at this moment. One of the hidden features of his Ero's skill was that it allowed him to control his fertility. Lena was taking deep breaths, trying to bring herself back from the blissful feeling. Her face and ears were flushed red. And once she was able to look at Rimuru again, her eyes were filled with passion and desire. His skill, Invigorate, was passively taking effect, bringing both of them energy to continue. Moans continued to come out of the room for the rest of that night. Eventually, even with Invigorate's help, Lena became too tired to continue. And so they both fell asleep. This is the first time Rimuru enters his pseudo-sleep mode.